Welcome back for another video. The Expert Series is a massive community collaboration involving over 200 top FPL managers. Every week they share their transfer plans, captaincy, chip usage, which I pulled together for these videos. So with the experts all signed up, here's their combined rank histories. They've got 5 finishes in the top 100 in the world, 49 top 1k finishes, and 367 top 10k finishes. And this season I'm glad to welcome the current world champion Jonas to the series as well. Quick shout out to Whitebeard FPL who obtained all their rank histories for me. And shout out to Premier Fantasy Tools which allows me to track all their teams in one place. So it's an invaluable set of data every week which you can use to do better in FPL. Hit subscribe so you don't miss out. For the Game Week 1 edition we're going to be focusing on their most owned players in the Experts team. They've sent their full squads in, we've got 2,250 players. So let's begin by sorting them all into position and the most owned assets. Goalkeepers first. And to explain the columns, we've got the Experts column, so what's the ownership in the Experts teams only, and then we've got overall ownership, and then lastly the difference between the two. The difference column's helpful for identifying those hidden gems, players that top managers are looking at which your overall player base and your casual mates might be sleeping on. And there is a clear favourite here, it's Henderson from Palace in 65% of teams. I talked about him lots in the team selection video, make sure you watch that if you haven't. He's also my keeper. 4.5 mil, and Palace impressed defensively under Glasner last season, ranking 4th best for expected goals conceded. And the opening fixtures aren't horrendous, and Johnston's reportedly asked to leave Palace, so Henderson's their clear number 1 keeper. What we can see clearly is their favoured approach to the keeper spot is to spend as little as possible for the most part. We've got 4 mil goalkeepers, Valnemarsson, Fabianski, Virginia, Matthews and Bentley all popping up here. If Johnson does leave Palace, then Matthews could be Henderson's 4 mil backup as well, though it does mean triple Palace if you've got someone like Eze as well, and there is a chance to sign a replacement if he leaves. Palace is opening 5 at Brentford, West Ham, Chelsea, Leicester, Man United. Flecken's their next most popular starting keeper, he's in 16% of teams. A mixed bag of opening games. They do have Palace and Southampton home, Game Week 1 and 3, but they've got Liverpool, City and Spurs, Game Week 2, 4 and 5. 14% of experts have backed Raya as a slightly cheaper route into the best defence in the league last season. 28.4 expected goals conceded was comfortably top. City was second with 35.9 expected goals conceded. Let's move on to defenders, which makes for interesting reading. Barco sits in a crazy 81% of experts teams. So what are the pros and cons of Barco? Well, first of all, he's 4 mil, so you literally can't go any cheaper. He's played great in pre-season, even taken some corners, and Estupinan's injured, who would be his competition normally. The downside is that he may or may not be a temporary option. Who knows what Herzler does when Estupinan returns, and the news this morning is he's back on the training pitch. They're also strongly linked with Kadioglu, who Fenerbahce fans strongly argue plays best in left wing back, despite being right-footed, though Brighton's right side has looked more vulnerable, so that could be where he starts if the deal gets over the line. Herzler and St. Pauli were top in the league for expected goals conceded last season, so there could be lots of value in the Brighton defence. Trent is their second favourite defender in 73% of teams. The most expensive defender, but for good reason. His underlying numbers resemble a midfielder, yet he can get you clean sheet points on top of that, and there's plenty of clean sheet potential in Liverpool's opening run of games. 27% owned overall, so a whopping 46% different. Vardio just edges it ahead of Porro as their second favourite premium defender with 47% ownership. Porro 46%, and just below is Robinson in 43% of teams, and further down the list we've got Cons at 18%, and they both rotate great with Porro if you want to bench him against Newcastle and Arsenal Game Week 3 and 4. So Barco's their clear favourite defender, but we've also got Johnson and Fass as the other 4 mil defenders here on the list. I'd be very careful picking 2 4 mil defenders unless you've got a rock solid starting back 3 that doesn't need to be rotated, otherwise you might be asking for trouble. Kwanzaa's in 29% of teams, and he looks like the first choice Liverpool centre back heading into Game Week 1. Could be an absolute gem if he can keep the spot in the team alongside Van Dijk. Doubling up with Trent's not a bad play. So Gabriel's the most owned Arsenal defender, albeit 12%. If I were picking an Arsenal defender, it would be Gabriel. He's got more goal threat than Saliba, and you'd imagine Arteta doesn't chop and change what worked so well last season, despite the arrival of Calafiori, who probably gets eased into the team, and he could be used at left back initially. Onto the midfielders, and their most owned mid is Nkunku in 64% of teams, which means a 47% difference to overall ownership. Seemingly, lots of the overall player base are put off by that Game Week 1 fixture, but let's not forget, you want to pick players for a block of fixtures. I personally like to look at the next 4 or 5 when buying a player, which means you're also getting him for Wolves, Palace, Bournemouth and West Ham, and he has looked Chelsea's best player in pre-season. Saka's joint second most owned with Jota. A surprisingly large gap between Saka and the other premium midfielders, Son and Palmer both just 5% owned, and Salah 38% owned among the experts, only slightly above his overall ownership. Longer term, Jota is a bit of a risk for minutes. Slot's got Gakpo and Darwin, both capable of playing there, but in their final pre-season friendly against Sevilla, it was Jota up top and he looked great. He scored a class volley and he got an assist. Undeniable upside versus newly promoted Ipswich Game Week 1. In case you missed it, Bob's fractured a bone in his leg and he's going to be out for a while. Devastating news, he really was going to be a factor for 5 mil, but avoid him. Rodgers is in 33% of Experts Team and he's looking the most assured of the 5 mil midfielders now, however not totally nailed himself necessarily. That said, in pre-season no one played more minutes than Rodgers for Villa. Murphy's in 19% of teams and perhaps the most informed player in pre-season across all teams with 5 goals 3 assists, home to Southampton Game Week 1. The risk with him is Barnes, who could start ahead of him at some point and certainly come off the bench for him. Barnes scored in Newcastle's final friendly game, though it looked more or less like an A team and a B team split, and he was in the latter. Only 5.5 mil for Murphy though. We're pretty spoiled this season in terms of the 5.5 mil mids. Smith Rowe's in 46% of Experts teams, and there's lots of other options like Semenyo, Hudson-Odoi and Minte. Onto the forwards then, and this is absolutely wild. Isak's got 100% ownership in the Experts team, every single one of them have picked him. What's also surprising is Haaland's dominance in their selection, 85% owned. Salah was 38% owned. The emergence of Jota as a pick has helped, though lots are going with Haaland and no Jota. Compared to Salah, he is a 5 mil cheaper route into Liverpool's attack, and Diaz as well looks set to start the season in left wing for Liverpool. After his switch from Bournemouth to Spurs, 49% have picked Solanke up. Leicester a possible team to target this season, and based on Postecoglou's remarks, he sounds set to start in Game Week 1 straight away. João Pedro is their favourite budget forward in 27% of teams. One thing to be careful with is the possible arrival of Rutter from Leeds, who's another player potentially competing for minutes with him. I've personally steered clear, not just because of that, but also João Pedro only played 45 minutes in pre-season right at the very end, having been injured earlier. He's not a bad budget forward though. For 0.5 mil more, 10% have picked Muniz and 7% have picked Wood. Watkins in a shockingly low 5% of teams. Let's have a look at one of the Experts Game Week 1 teams. If you're new to this series, throughout the season we'll interview top managers to hear what they're doing. FPL Fran has shared his Game Week 1 team, and he's got his own channel of excellent content, worth checking him out. His team is Henderson, Trent, Porro, Quansah, Nkunku, Saka, Fernandes, Eze, João Pedro, Isak and Haaland, and his bench is Fabianski, Rodgers, Konsa and Barco. Here's what he had to say. Rodgers to cover João Pedro in Game Week 3 when he plays Arsenal. Konsa to cover the bad Porro fixture in Game Week 4. I'm chancing Barco given Estupinan's injury timeline. I'm not too worried about Kadioglu for now given his positional flexibility. Nkunku and João Pedro picks mostly due to the season-long projections being so good, it feels hard to start without. Haaland or Salah is just a personal judgment. I don't think there's anything in between the two drafts. I've gone for Quansah as he is the favourite 4.5 mil to overperform early given Liverpool's fixtures, and it's very clear he is first choice now, but it's also a position he can lose as Konate is very solid. Last friendly gave quite a bit of positive confirmation as it was effectively a dress rehearsal for Game Week 1, and it was also the first virtual game back. I don't mind doubling up on 2 times Liverpool clean sheet, as I prefer backing expected clean sheets over a diversified defence, although Hull was a favourite of mine too before I moved to Quansah. 3 names have always popped up in the majority of most of my drafts, which are Isak, Bruno and Trem. Just scream great value at the start of the season with their minutes very solid. 2 penalty takers and high expected minutes attackers are essential to their team, and a lot of set pieces between Trent and Fernandes make it very easy to pick them. Thanks very much for sending in, Fran. Moving on to chips, and throughout the season we're going to be following the Experts chip strategy, and hang on, 2% have got their bench boost active. Now this is interesting, the Game Week 1 bench boost. It's a very unique approach to chip strategy and we've seen it work before. The logic being, you're essentially wildcarding straight into the bench boost by doing it in Game Week 1, which you can't do in the season. And if the chip's out of the way, you don't need to worry about it later on, whereas the typical play is you wildcard with your bench boost in mind shortly after, and therefore you're spending less in your starting 11. Now Oscar's got his bench boost active, not me by the way. Let's have a look at his team. He's gone Flecken, Pedro Porro, Trent Vardiol, Salah, Saka, Nkunku, Jota, João Pedro, Havertz and Isak. And his bench is Henderson, Smith Rowe, Konsa and Barco. He's a top manager as well, with 3 top 10Ks in his last 6 seasons and a few top 100k finishes in there as well. Here's what he had to say. I'm still not entirely sure if I'll go through with it, but the chip is active. I feel like I mostly want to get the chip out of the way, even if it just nets me 10 to 15 points. I figure I'll make up the difference in simpler planning and less hits down the line. As for the whole team, I'm on Salah over Haaland at the moment. I just feel my team overall is much stronger with the extra funds. I'll just have to hide behind the sofa in Game Week 2. On the bench players, Barco's pretty template. He could be either of Nkunku, Smith Rowe or Pedro on the bench, but it feels like all three could grab me something in Game Week 1. Konsa good long term, and he could be another 4.5 to maximise the bench boost, possibly Kwanzaa if I shift Jota to someone else. Goalkeepers playing each other, so I'm just hoping for a 0-0 draw there. Like I said, I'm not hoping for massive points, but if I can at least get one return on the bench boost, then that would net me 10 plus total and it's out of the way. Lots of food for thought there. Best of luck with the bench boost if you do go through with it. That brings us to Experts Game Week 1 Captaincy. If this has been an enjoyable watch so far, hit subscribe to follow this series all season. The results are in and they are as follows. Isak takes the top spot, captained by 62% of the experts, followed by Salah with 23%, Haaland 10%, a few captaincies for Saka, and then Son and Jota of one each. So how do FPL review projections compare? It's got Salah and Haaland neck and neck with 7.3 and 7.2 points. A difference of 0.1 is noise here, not anything to read into. So if you've got both Salah and Isak, back yourself there, go with your gut. Saka, Haaland, Bruno and Son make the top 6 on the projections. Let us know in the comments who your captain is. Best of luck in Game Week 1. Onto the Experts team then, and this is built from the highest owned players across all their teams to form the Experts template team. It's a 3-5-2. It's Henderson in goal, in defence Trent, Vardy and Kwanzaa. In midfield Nkunku, Saka, Eze, Jota and Smith Rowe. Up front Haaland and Isak. The bench is Valdemarsson, João Pedro, Barco and Robinson. So the experts favouring the Haaland team to a Salah team, but in honesty, as Fran said, they're so close. The 2.5 mil does go a very long way if you pick Salah, and no one can confidently say which does better right now. In fact, they're both projected to do about the same over the opening 5 game weeks. Paul's someone we haven't discussed who just missed out to Kwanzaa by only 2%. He's been incredible in pre-season with 1 goal, 2 assists, and he faces Southampton to kick the season off. It's just a question of whether Howe gives Burn a starting left back at some point, particularly if they sign Guehi. Though Burn's best position is surely centre back, and Hall offers so much more than Burn in left back. If you pick Hall, just make sure you've got sufficient coverage on your bench. It's a fantastic team on paper with all 100 mil spent. Will it deliver? Find out this time next week. Finishing up with the experts' final thoughts and tips for Game Week 1, here's what they had to say. Amra Batman says, planning for a Game Week 4 wildcard, and I'm hoping to roll transfers into and out of the wildcard. Dan says, it's important to have a team structure that allows you to easily get to any asset if they hit the ground running. I think it's important to not completely spread funds, or else it will be hard to jump on a higher priced asset if needed. FPL Carefree says, it feels like those at FPL Towers have done a good job with pricing this year. Lots of tough decisions to be made. For me, I think Isak's the only one who's severely underpriced. Victor says, the new FPL season has arrived, bringing with it the ultimate dilemma, Salah, Haaland or both. Salah's consistency and Haaland's goal scoring prowess are impossible to ignore, but with their hefty price tags, fitting both into the squad is a challenge and that could make or break the entire season. Good luck everyone. Fish says, this is the best part of the FPL season, everyone hopeful and confident. Enjoy while it lasts. For most, the frustration will soon kick in. Please remember it's a marathon, not a sprint. We all have setbacks, don't give up. This series is a massive effort behind the scenes to put together, so hit like to support the channel and subscribe. Later today we're going to be looking at 4 FPL Champions final Game Week 1 teams. See you soon for the next one.